Lovely to see so many of you here. And there is a mixed audience. It's normally ladies I speak to because they're more interested in things than men, but it looks like one born have got 10 out of 10.
Yeah, see, we're always the best.
Sorry?
We're always the best.
Oh, well, yes. I do like the tandoori over the road.
We could have gone there instead of doing this.
Well, right. Well, as I've been introduced, we'll carry on. It's John Corbett and the history of Corbett Hospital. So just to make sure this works. Right. So, is everyone familiar with the Delph? Withymoor, on the way to Sainsbury's. Right, so that's the area I'm going to speak about first of all. Right, John Corbett was born in 1817 and he was the first of 6 boys and a girl to John and Anna Corbett. John's date of birth is a bit of a mystery. There's no formal record, but we do know that he was born in Gas Street in the Delph, and that's sort of just off Turner's Lane. I mean, there's no such place anymore as Gas Street, but that's the location there. It's reported that John attended the local Anglican church school. And I must admit, he was one of the star pupils. He absorbed information at a great rate of knots, and he enjoyed being in the education system. He was a quiet boy. He didn't like mixing, and he didn't like the rough and tumble that men would normally, or boys would normally, do in the playground. But of course, in those days, he had to leave school and work for his father. And he went to work in the boatyard. He had a half share in the business, so was keen to make a success of things. Now, from the diagram here, if I can just, sorry, I've been all the way on time. I've got the right thing here. You can see these dark markers here. This is the canal running down through the Delph, and it's the 10th lock, 9 and 10, 11 locks down there. And as you can see, I've marked it here, and that's where John and Hannah lived with their children, so they were right on the canal side. I mean, I think the roundabout where we come down from the canal there and where it joins here, I think that part's still there with a little island. Could everyone see that? Right, so this is the family tree, John Corbett, 1797 to 1806, 1801, and then there was Anna Cole, John, and as we go on, and there and all the children. But the last one born was Thomas. And John sort of took Thomas under his wing and helped him along during his schooling days. And actually much later on than that. In 1840, John was about 23 years old and was keen to make his own way in the world. He left his family business, so his father wasn't very happy, I would have thought, with that, to work for the local engineering firm Hunt and Brown. At this time, a new school had opened in Brierley Hill called the Academy, and I presume that John attended both to further his education, both in the workplace and the academy. By his late 20s, John had begun to make a name for himself in the engineering industry. So he was quick, he wanted to impress people with his knowledge. So he took it on himself to make himself known. Well, in 1852, John heard of the sale of the salt works at Stoke Pryor. Everyone know where Stoke Pryor is? Bromsgrove. I think if it's very hard to. Does anyone know the Ham Return? No. Well, it's a quite rural, and it's out on the Bromsgrove, out on the other side of Bromsgrove. John was offered £1,000 down payment, with a further payment made to secure the sale, and he became the sole owner of the salt works in 1858, which was quite not too far, from when he bought it to when he actually owned it. John bought much of the attached land to the salt works, allowing the factory to be served both by the canal and the railway. And as you can see again here, the canal runs through here. These buildings here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they were the original salt works. And you can see how it's expanded on both sides of the canal. And of course there is the railway running along there, so we got access to both. He made vast amount of money, but the way he had to make the money was, if I can describe it only as atrocious conditions. When he first went there, he saw that the people that were working there were actually not dressed because it was so hot in the salt works, and they had burns on the hands and their arms from actually taking the salt from the water. And this was, he thought, no, I can't do this. This has to be improved. So he set about bringing in new machinery and technology that helped the workforce. I think I might have, that's right, on that. And of course this salt, because you've got the two routes with the trains and the canals, and the canals obviously went to Bristol and down on the coast, they actually took the salt all around the world through camel trains. But early in the 1870s, the salt prices began to drop, and competitors both home and abroad started to develop. So neither of John's sons had any interest in taking over the business, and he sold it in 1891 at the age of 74. But as I've just said, he was a caring employer. He wanted to improve the conditions at the factory, and he went about by using his engineering knowledge to bring in new equipment. Workers were given reasonable hours with good pay, and Sundays were reinstated as days off. Prior to that, they were having to work 7 days a week just to make enough money to live and buy the food. So he was improving things slowly. New houses were built and made available for the workers. And the biggest change, that instead of women actually working by the side of the gentlemen, were given women's wages were paid to the men, so it left the women free to actually stay at home and look after the children. Eventually, John saw the building of a church and a school, and he provided a community for his workforce and families, and he built an open space with parkland as well. So I think all in all he did a good job. He was also a member of Parliament. He was a Liberal. He was a devout Anglican Christian, which influenced his progressive beliefs around social welfare and care. He was a caring employer and other social reform acts, and also with the women's suffrage. In 1874, John stood as a candidate for Droitwich against John Packingham in the local council elections, and his seat was unopposed. John Corbett was one of the wealthiest men in politics at the time, giving in excess of £30,000, which was a lot of money then, to the Liberal Party. In 1886, John joined the Liberal Unionists, and then at the end he retired from politics in the year of 1892-1875. After serving the government and members of Parliament for 18 years, overseeing many welfare reforms. But during the time that John was building his engineering knowledge, he went abroad, and I say went abroad, he probably went to France. That was the nearest port to England at the time. And he met O'Mara, I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced. And of course, Anna was of Irish descent, born in 1832. And Anna's father was John O'Meara, was a member of the British Diplomatic Corps in Paris, where Anna was raised. I think this was a marriage of convenience more than anything else. They were married on the 7th of April, 1856. And this is the only picture I've got of Hannah in the top corner. The only other one is when she's a very old lady in her 90s with silk and crinoline. So she was quite a nice looking lady. That's an older picture of John. And in the other corner, that's John's coat of arms, that's their coat of arms. Anne and John started off married life at the Grange at Avencroft near Bromsgrove. And by 1868, Anne and John had 5 children and needed a larger house that met the necessities. Now, I'm not sure whether it was John's idea or whether it was Anna's idea, but the house should be close to the salt works at Stoke Prior, that it should be built on stable ground, because I didn't want it subsiding, that it should enhance John's social standing. Obviously, remember, he's in London, he's in Parliament, and it should actually be wonderful. The construction of Intley Hall began in 1873 and was completed in 1877. And it cost in the region of £91,453 to build. About 5 million today, so give or take a few million. It was actually a chateau, Now I'm not sure, ladies, whether it was Anna's doing, being as she was French and she wanted to live in the grandeur of the French style, or whether it was actually John's gift to her, as he was supposedly in love with her. But the chateau was built to the highest standard and mirrored the French grandeur inside and out. The gardens were also landscaped to mimic the French style. Now, I'll show you a picture in a second or two of the actual chateau. But they ended up with 6 children. But the final child, Claire, was a disappointment to John. Now remember, he's spending a lot of time in London. And I think there must have been a little bit of falling out between them, because by 1884, John and Anna signed a deed of separation. And I mean, in those days, it was unheard of for people to get divorced, never mind separated. I like this bit. The reason for the divorce is unclear. It stated as unhappy differences have arisen between the said John Corbett and Anna Eliza Corbett. So in other words, it was nobody else's business. John provided a monthly allowance for Anna and the children to live comfortably. A clause in the deed of separation prevented Anna from being within 40 miles of John Corbett or any of his estates. So I think she upset him big time, one way or another. Oops. Oh, this is the first house they lived in. I mean, this is not small by any means. This is the Grange at Avencroft, and this is where I think she was getting a little bit claustrophobic, but I mean, that's not a bad sized home to live in. And this is the chateau that he built for her, or vice versa, I'm not sure, but I should say Anna had a lot of influence in the design. And of course, we all know it as the Chateau Impney, Droitwich, which is now actually, it's derelict and it's run down, and it was such a shame really, because it was such a grand building. And then as you can see, the gardens were still the French design. I mean, the pathways up, when they had balls, there was a complete ballroom underneath the chateau, and when they had people come on weekends, they had 15 gardens actually looking after the grounds at any one time, and they used to have to rake every time a carriage came up. They used to rake all the gravel back, so it was like a continual red carpet, if you like, for when people came. Now, this is the house in Wales that John said Anna could live at for the rest of her days, which she did until her death when she was 93. And I mean, this is no small house, and it is where she lived with her daughters. But John took care of his boys, and they went to school in Shrewsbury, actually, a private school in Shrewsbury, so he put his boys through private school as well as looking after Thomas, and he looked after all his siblings as well. So you can see where the money is being spent. I don't know, do you want to break now? Or
no, carry on, Andrew.
Carry on?
Yeah, carry on.
Right, well, the Corbett Hospital, and this is where John comes in, back to Amblecote. From Hill to Hospital, this is what I've called it. So in 1872, George Mills was a a glass manager, a manufacturer, and he moved from Brettle Lane to the Hill. Now, just to be precise, the Hill was the house where Corbett, the original Corbett Hospital was, right on the top of the hill. People get mixed up, and at the bottom of the hill there's a house, and it's called Hill House, and that was built afterwards for the first lot of consultants and doctors. But anyway, going on, George Mills committed suicide. I think he had a lot of debts as well, of almost £11,500, and the contents of the Hill were sold by Mary Kate Mills to pay off George Mills's debts. And then as we come down, the Hill was sold to John Corbett for £6,500. And that was my, I think, that was the price I paid, well, we paid for our first house back in 1974. So there we go. John Corbett offered the 30-acre Hill estate, plus £20,000 endowment and £2,000 conversion fund, I should say, as an 18-bedded hospital to serve the people of Stourbridge and the surrounding district. And then by 1893, the Corbett Hospital was formally opened by Viscountess Corbett. A golden key was specially made for the ceremony. And this is the Hill. It officially opened, as I say, on the 1st of August 1893, and by 1897 to 1920, many extensions were added to meet the growing demand, such as isolation wards, children's wards. During the Great War, though, there was a lot going on. I don't know whether any of you can remember Ward 14. Before the two new wards were built many years later, 16 and 18, but Ward 14 was one of the last wards, and that was an actual outpatients department, and it was for treating wounded soldiers. After the war, the hospital was rebuilt and expanded to include 84 beds, operating theatre, private wards, sterilising rooms, and of course the training centre for nurses. And then again on the 2nd of June 1934 was the opening of the new wards and the nurses' home by Viscount Common. So it was Viscountess and Viscount Common. Well, hospital funding, obviously, because of the dates, the NHS wasn't formed until 1948? Who's got the date? 1948. So obviously all the money that had to be raised to fund it. And obviously carnivals were traditionally held each year from 1897 to 1960. And up until 1948, these were used to raise the money for the hospital, and it became part of the NHS, and subsequently it was publicly funded. And of course, it used to attract hundreds and hundreds of people each year, and I think the actual carnival was held to the back of the hospital, and round to the side of the hospital where the nurses' home was. And obviously they had some good entertainment, trapeze artists, there was a circus tent, Royal Air Force bands, grand horticultural shows, to name but a few. And the money raised was for the maintenance and the upkeep of the hospital. And this is where we see in 1946 the National Health Service Act was passed. And then we go on 1948, and I've already said that the new buildings were built to provide for students and doctors, trainee doctors. 1964, the building completed of a new outpatients and A&E department, and I'm sure you all remember that at the bottom of the Corbett Hospital, a great big new outpatients. The Corbett League of Friends in 1968 was formed. Any of you a member then? Or they were a lovely group of people. Everything they did was voluntary for the hospital. They bought equipment, they bought combs and nightwear for the patients who came in without anything. And it went on and on. They had the coffee shop in the outpatients department, and they were just a lovely bunch of people. Of course, we got to 1992 and plans were unveiled to expand Russell's Hall Hospital. Now, that was the first time anyone had heard of Russell's Hall Hospital. Nobody had ever heard of it before. Including, and they wanted to close the Corbett Hospital. Well, I'm afraid they got a bit of a fight on their hands, because I remember being there, and we all came out in protest against a big hospital. We wanted to keep our little hospital. And the next decade, the proposal was amended several times. So it was decided that the Corbett Hospital would be downsized to outpatient services only, and that's 1998. But in 2005, the old Corbett Hospital was closed after 112 years. Some days. And the new Corbett Hospital is opened, and the Hill Mansion is demolished to make way for 87 new homes. And this was the original Hill house at the top of the hill. An old picture, obviously, but. And then this is the house at the bottom of the hill. This was actually built when it started to become a training hospital for doctors. And then the doctors lived in that house there. Again, that's another view. And this is the view from the back. If you can remember the Corbett Hospital, the canteen was towards the back of the building, and then you could see over the fields at the back and the meadow. And I think Marsh and Baxter's used to bring some of their cows down to graze on the land. And yes, it was a lovely outlook towards the back of the hospital. I'm almost finished, actually. Shall I carry on?
Yeah, keep going, Andrea. Yeah.
John Corbett died on April 22nd, 1901, aged 84 years, passing away suddenly at his home, the Chateau, from a cerebral hemorrhage. Now, I've mentioned his brother, Thomas. Thomas looked after him all the way through, because he put him through medical school, and he trained at St Thomas's Hospital, and then he became a GP in the area. John Corbett was worth an estimated £240,000, roughly 24 million today, on his death. So that was a lot of money. In his will, the family were well looked after, and the only one not to inherit is Anna Eliza Corbett, who John, excuse me, who John stipulated that no monies would be made available to her, as she'd been well provided for during his lifetime, so he must have fell out with her, really proper. And this is actually John Corbett's grave. And at the back, this is a marble grave, and it lies in St Mary's Churchyard in Stoke Prior. And then just to the back of that, if I can just show you there across the top, that's his brother Thomas's grave, but obviously that's not in marble. They lie side by side. This is an old picture of one of the nurses, I should say. She's just passed her finals. She seems happy there to receive a book. Now, this is a picture of the nurse's home, and this is one of the rooms, and it's very much like I had when I nursed. There was a wardrobe, a dressing table, a bed, and a bookcase. We couldn't go far wrong, could we? Oh, and an easy chair. And this is in the nurse's home again, and this is the refectory, we used to call it, where we used to, you see the grand piano at the back on the stage. Oops, on 2 minutes. Oh, there we are. The grand piano there, and because I wanted to just keep us as fit as we could be. And yes, it was a big room, and we all used to congregate in there on an evening, a classroom. And I remember sitting 1, 2, 3 desks back. The desks were exactly the same, they never altered. From there, and I should say they're talking about the heart there. Looks like one of my favourite organs in the body. And this is an early shot of one of the outpatients. And I think this poor young lad here, I don't know whether oops, I've done it again. This young lad here is looking for some fish off him. He's interested anyway, and that's the ophthalmology department. He looks quite a stern gentleman, doesn't he, at the top there? Well, they all do, really. And these are the first doctors that actually, consultants that worked at the hospital. Again, you've got the, oops, I'll do it again. Well, he looks a bit of a stern fellow, doesn't he? These were the doctors that obviously started the ball rolling. And this is, if you can see here, this is Ward 14. And that part there, just along that line there, was the original part of the Hill House. And that was used as the outpatients department, and the 2 wards to the side were the new builds later on. Again, the outpatients department and the nurses' home. You see how they wanted to try and keep all the balustrades and the big oak doors there. It was lovely, really. Sad it had to go. And then we've got the gates that are still there as far as I know. And this is the new Corbett's. But of course, the old hospital, when it was knocked down, the rubble and all the aggregate from the old hospital was actually moved along and used for the new building. And of course that's the new Corbett Hospital there. And that's about it. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.